All right, let's start with something a little dark, because why not? Released on June 25th, 1976, Alice Cooper Goes to Hell hit shelves just before the summer kicked off, and by July it was all over the radio. Billboard reviewed it in July and called it everything from tearful balladry to humorous, semi-autobiographical heavy metal. And honestly, that's a pretty accurate description of a man whose entire career is basically a dramatic, theatrical production of his own brain.
For smoking and drinking alcohol constantly. For making a stout up.
The single I Never Cry was performed live on NBC's Midnight Special, taped August 5th, and then it just kept climbing the charts all the way through autumn. The album peaked at number 27 on the Billboard 200 and spent 25 weeks on the chart. 25 weeks. That's basically the entire second half of the year. It was a concept sequel to Welcome to My Nightmare, and if you thought that first one was a lot, yeah, Alice went further. Your older uncle, who had this on vinyl, definitely played air guitar in his bedroom and thought nobody knew.
Break a heart. Break a heart of stone. I'm going out of my mind since I met you.
Now here's one that came out in late June, late enough that it spent most of its chart life deep in the summer of 1976. Spitfire was the first Jefferson album ever to ship gold on its release date. First one, ever. That's not just impressive, that's the kind of stat you bring up at a dinner party to sound like you know things. It then sat at number 3 on the Billboard chart for 6 consecutive weeks. 6 weeks! That's not luck, that's a band firing on all cylinders at exactly the right moment. With Your Love was the smooth FM radio earworm of the season. Jefferson Airplane had already become Jefferson Starship by this point, which either horrified the purists or thrilled everyone who wanted more polished, radio-friendly rock. The purists were probably not happy, but the charts don't lie, and Spitfire was everywhere that summer. Your older uncle definitely had an opinion about whether this was better or worse than the Airplane days. He was wrong, by the way.
The cottage is pretty. The main house a palace.
If you were in Britain in the summer of 1976, and you had even a passing interest in anything artsy, glammy, or just slightly weirder than the average rock band, Viva was on your radar. Released July 16th, Roxy Music's first live album captured 3 UK shows from 1973 to 1975, and it peaked at number 6 on the UK albums chart.
Can't throw you away now. Immortal and life-size.
Now, Roxy Music doing a live album is a particular kind of event because Bryan Ferry performing live is basically Bryan Ferry treating the stage like his personal lounge. It's glam rock, it's art rock, it's a man in a dinner jacket treating Virginia Plain like high culture, and somehow it works completely. The thing about this record is that it wasn't just a cash-in life release. It actually sounded like a band that knew exactly what it was doing in front of an audience, which, given how meticulously constructed Roxy Music always were in the studio, was slightly surprising. Slightly.
Laughter about the tears, I'll follow you to the end.
Okay, bear with me here, because this one requires a tiny bit of setup. Jon Anderson is the lead singer of, yes, you know him, the high voice, the spiritual lyrics, the general sense that he's received messages from a slightly different dimension than the rest of us. On July 9th, 1976, he released a solo album he wrote, performed, and produced entirely alone. Every single part, no band. Olias of Sunhillow is a concept album about 4 alien tribes escaping their dying planet, told through layered vocals, unusual instrumentation, and electronic textures that in 1976 were genuinely strange. It peaked at number 8 on the UK albums chart, which, for a solo album made entirely by one man with no band and a story about space aliens, is frankly extraordinary. Yes was on hiatus at the time, and Anderson apparently thought the appropriate response was to make an ambitious art rock concept record all by himself, which is just very Jon Anderson.
Oh, New England, dum da dum da dum 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 day. Oh, New England, right a while.
Here's where things get a little quirky. Jonathan Richman had already been kicking around for years by 1976, and the original Modern Lovers recordings from 1971 and 1972 were already legendary among people who knew about them. But this July 1976 release on Berserkly Records was a new band going in a completely different direction, softer, more playful, almost childlike in its simplicity.
I'm a little airplane, y'all. I'm a little airplane, y'all. I'm a little airplane, y'all.
While everyone else in rock was getting bigger, louder, and more theatrical, Richman was writing songs about Ice Cream Man and having a good time. It's either endearing or baffling, depending on your mood, but it was genuinely unlike anything else on the charts. He wasn't trying to be proto-punk anymore. He wasn't trying to be much of anything that the industry expected. Your older uncle probably didn't own this one, but his slightly younger, cooler cousin absolutely did, and wouldn't stop talking about it.
Dum-a-dum-day now. Dum-de-dum-de-dum-dum-a-dum-day. Oh, I love New England. Dum-de-dum-de-dum. This never happened to Pablo Picasso.
And speaking of the Modern Lovers, also August 1976, also Berserkly Records. Here's the other one. The original recordings. The ones that actually matter to rock historians. Recorded in 1971 and 1972, produced partly by John Cale of the Velvet Underground. This album contains Roadrunner and Pablo Picasso, which is all you really need to know. Roadrunner is one of those songs where you either immediately get it or you're probably fine with whatever else was on the radio. It's raw, it's driving, it captures the specific feeling of being young and driving at night with the radio on, and it influenced basically everyone who came after it in punk and alternative rock.
I'm in love with the radio on. It helps me from being alone late at night.
The fact that it sat unreleased for 4 years before finally coming out is almost criminal. Almost. Because at least it came out eventually, and now it's rightfully considered one of the most influential debut albums in rock history.
He's hanging on to half a heart, but he can have the restless part.
August 9th, 1976, and Linda Ronstadt delivers her third straight platinum album. Third straight platinum. At some point, you stop calling it a hot streak and start calling it a career. Hasten Down the Wind won the Grammy for Best Pop Vocal Performance, and it contains songs written by Warren Zevon and Carla Bonoff, two names that should mean something to anyone who takes songwriting seriously.
Come home with me. You're shining and well free.
What Ronstadt did better than almost anyone in the 1970s was take genuinely great songs and make them sound effortless. Country rock, pop rock, whatever you want to call it. The woman could sing, and she had an absolute gift for finding the right material. The album was everywhere that summer. If you were in a car in August 1976 with the radio on, you heard this record. Your older uncle probably had a crush on Linda Ronstadt and will not discuss it further.
He's hanging on to half a heart, but he can have the restless part.
More than a feeling. More than a feeling. When I hear that old song.
Oh, you knew this one was coming. Released August 25th, 1976, on Epic Records, the debut album by Boston became the best-selling debut LP in American history at the time. The best-selling debut ever at the time. That's not a small claim. More Than a Feeling. Longtime Peace of Mind. This is one of those records where even people who weren't paying attention to rock music in 1976 somehow absorbed it by osmosis. Tom Scholz recorded most of it in his basement on equipment he largely built himself, which is either the most impressive or the most obsessive origin story in classic rock, depending on your perspective. The production is pristine, the melodies are enormous, and the guitars sound like they were designed specifically to make you feel like you're driving very fast towards something important. Arena rock at its absolute peak. Still sounds good. Your older uncle has this on at least 2 formats.
Wrapped up like a deuce under the roller in the night, blinded by the light.
Here's the underdog of the summer. Released August 27th, 1976. The Roaring Silence became Manfred Mann's Earth Band's breakthrough record on both sides of the Atlantic. And the reason why is a cover of a Bruce Springsteen song. Blinded by the Light hit #1 in the United States. #1 for a British progressive rock band covering a relatively obscure Springsteen album track. That is not a result anyone predicted. Springsteen himself has said he didn't fully understand the song until he heard this version, which is either generous or genuinely true. The Earth Band took the original and wrapped it in this swirling progressive arrangement that felt both slick and slightly strange, which is kind of their whole thing. The rest of the album is solid progressive pop rock, but let's be honest, everyone's there for Blinded by the Light, and that song absolutely earns its place in the summer of 1976 canon. And finally, the one you've almost certainly never heard of, which is exactly why it's on this list. August 1976, RCA Records, Atlanta, Georgia. Mother's Finest were a band doing something genuinely unusual, fusing heavy rock guitar with deep funk and soul in a way that was years ahead of where mainstream rock was heading.
Just keep holding down.
Their debut is a cult classic in the truest sense. Not many people bought it at the time, but the people who did never stopped talking about it. Joyce Kennedy's vocals are ferocious. The guitars are heavy. The rhythm section is tight in that way that only happens when musicians are actually listening to each other. It's the kind of record that makes you wonder what would have happened if rock radio had been slightly more adventurous in 1976. It wasn't. But the album exists, and it's great, and your older uncle definitely does not own this one, but he absolutely should. And there you have it. 10 albums from one of the most quietly loaded summers in rock history. Boston selling out record stores, Ronstadt winning Grammys, Jonathan Richman doing his own thing in a corner somewhere, and Mother's Finest being criminally ignored by everyone except the people who knew. The summer of 1976 gave us more than anyone really gave it credit for at the time. So which one is on your list? Did I miss something obvious? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you love digging through the archives of classic rock like I do, hit subscribe and let's keep going.
Oh, New England, dum da dum da dum 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 day. Oh,